Modern day fighting games just genuinely annoy the fuck out of me. They always have, ever since Killer Instinct 2013. The third game in the Killer Instinct series, having a lot of what a lot of games have nowadays, having to acquire several years of patchwork, and having lack of content at launch, and then games like Street Fighter V in 2016, embracing this lack of offline content with the sole reason that people don't play offline arcade games when almost every fucking person on Earth who has played fighting games enough has at least dabbled into the offline market at some point. And it's extremely tiring that people forget this fucking lesson. I'm not digressing this time because I know I'm correct. If you tell me that you've been a fan of Tekken, but never cared to actually unlock the content in Tekken, but then only play Tekken now because of the online netcode, you're just fucking lying to yourself. This rant comes from a bunch of X.com discourse with people basically trying to autocorrect me as if I'm some clueless hollow who knows nothing what I'm talking about. Whether it be recent posts such as Sega fans should just expect a Denuvo at this point, considering that fucking Sonic Forces still has Denuvo almost 5 years later, and the only reason they got rid of Denuvo in Sonic Mania was because of the overwhelmingly negative backlash, in which even then the game's Denuvo was cracked days after anyway, but yet people will still make the argument of Mania had Denuvo, your point? And then even other people saying the game was overwhelmingly hated simply because of Denuvo. Well, guess what? Tekken 8 has absolutely no Denuvo whatsoever, at least according to one Harada-san, and yet the game is still a fucking piece of shit. Uninteresting roster with blatantly reused costumes from Tekken 7. None of the characters from Tekken 7 that were kind of interesting would make a return. And yes, I know that Gigas could be seen as a third-rate Jack, but considering that the character dynamic between Katarina and Gigas, absolutely nothing between those two is remotely explained. And I'm sorry, this isn't fucking Tekken 3, we can get away with that shit. You have to have some sort of established ground on character endings. Even if the story endings in Tekken 7 were a fucking joke, they made the pre-order bonus character have a fucking narcolepsy joke, and not even a good one at that. Could have used her as the Devil Gene basis instead of Akuma, but I'm not going to get into that. And even the fact that Harada decided to make Heihachi canon, despite the whole point of Tekken 7 was to basically kill off Heihachi for good. Heihachi coming back is about as predictable as Sega games having Denuvo, and yet people are mad at me for this, and I don't know why. It's not like Sega hasn't added Denuvo to their latest games, and they'll probably have it forever. And even games like Doom 2016, Doom Eternal, Balan Wonderworld, or other popular AAA games having Denuvo at launch but then removed, does not change the quality of the game as a whole. I'm going to try to keep this about the fighting games because, especially with the news of Virtua Fighter 5, the game that's so back, even though the content is going to no doubt be objectively barren, considering that Final Showdown was a thing, Ultimate Showdown was a thing, and then Virtua Fighter 5 Revo is going to be a thing, and I believe a couple of days. Fighting games are fucking joke now, and it sucks because I used to really enjoy them, and I know that not every fighting game in the past was seen as good. Star Gladiator, the PlayStation port from Capcom, barely has much to go by. A lot of Capcom ports back then were pretty barren. For every Alpha 3, you had something like Star Gladiator. It sucks, but they're still decent when you got friends to play it with, but what is so wrong with having a game that you can enjoy both with friends and with offline people? How do people not understand this? Even something like Tekken 5 or 6 or even Tag 2 having those ghost battles, you can still have a refined gameplay overall and still have a reason to keep going and to keep grinding, as the Gen Z likes to put it, or whatever the fuck. Or how about that hot game Street Fighter 6? That game's gonna have a second SNK character back-to-back, like Drake, except it's not Fortnite and it ain't Drake Bell, so I don't fucking care. There was a quote tweet I mentioned about someone basically saying that Kasumi should be added into Street Fighter 6. First of all, Street Fighter does not need this many guest characters. It was really asinine when Injustice 2 had not one guest character, but 2 guest characters in the same fucking IP. And even people who do tournament organizers will always have the matchup between Raiden and Sub-Zero because they want to have that magic of having Mortal Kombat in a fighting game made by NetherRealm Studios, who so happens to have the helm of creating a Warner Brothers DC-themed video game. I know the original Injustice had Scorpion, but here's the thing. The Ultimate Edition had the 5 characters that were not Scorpion in the front cover, and Scorpion being added as the last character was kind of a shock. A twist, if you will. It took Scorpion to have Kevin Conroy saying, "I'm Batman" in Injustice. Street Fighter 6 is basically an overcorrection of what Street Fighter 5 failed to do at launch. You have a whole bunch of modes that can be optionally installed, like Mortal Kombat 1, which is okay, I guess, but you're not going to really get much mileage out of those, even if you wanted to, considering that the arcade mode is just not as interesting as they have been in other games, and I don't care if you want to try to over-mansplain this. I'm not having any of it. Still images with artwork is so 1990s and it's not even funny. Okay, this isn't even Virtua Fighter 2 that did the exact same thing. And not to mention the whole World Tour thing. Yes, I'm still considering playing it, but here's another thing that people also need to understand. If the World Tour mode is as easy as it is, bro, just play these matches a couple times and you'll surely get the currency needed to unlock those battle costumes. Why is there a fucking paywall, and why is the fucking grind so monotonous to begin with? I'm gonna use the same fucking example I always give to these fucking dents who want to argue with this. What about games like Devil May Cry 5, the game where you can literally buy your collectibles and shit, as if that's any better? Or how about the mission that you get Faust, the red hat, that literally lets you farm orbs, even though the whole point of that weapon is to use the orbs to make it interesting. Having Climax in Dark Souls 2 letting you farm souls instead of earning them would go against the very thing that fucking Faust unironically does. I get the idea of a weapon whose power is based on what currency you have. When you can earn the currency by using said weapon, it's kind of a shitty design. Legit. It's just asinine that people will defend Street Fighter 6 as if it's the best thing ever. And I'm also going to defend Soul Calibur 6 in a bit as well, considering that the game has decent offline mode to play. It has the story mode per se, which lets you go through a mode with your one created character that unfortunately can't use outside of it, but not going to get into that. Or the whole little deal of having your created characters and downloading characters online and even writing down formulas that people post online and having spectator battles of the sort. I would argue that Soul Calibur 6, at least for the modern day of fighting games, has at least a hell of a lot more going for it than shitty-ass Street Fighter 6. Now, not to say that Soul Calibur 6 is perfect by any means. It is lacking in content, especially compared to Soul Calibur 3. It is nowhere near as balanced compared to Soul Calibur 2. It has DLC practices that is just asinine, whether it be having DLC jukeboxes, having legacy characters returning and shit, and mechanics that go against the fundamentals of Soul Calibur, yet Street Fighter 4 gets a pass with its Ultra system when it's not even the first Street Fighter game to have a comeback mechanic. But it is surely poorly implemented, and yet whenever people want to argue with me about comeback mechanics and shit, I'm just the asinine one, as if I'm fucking Dale Wilson. No, not that one. Little bro thinks he's so perfect. Well, I hope he... There are things in Street Fighter 6 whose designs just annoy the fuck out of me. Especially with the whole button input thing. And this is where I kind of have to put the whole participation ribbon, if I'm even saying it correctly. I don't fucking care. There are plenty of older fighting games that have a simple input, which is mainly used to people who just kind of don't care and just want to enjoy the game for a bit. But they're meant to be used as training wheels, and trying to unleash your inner potential with it is not going to go very far, since it is intentionally given for people who don't necessarily play fighting games. I distinctly remember playing Blaze Blue with one of my cousins. Like, oh, I don't really play these kinds of games. Oh, that's okay. There's a simple mode that just lets you mash buttons and you can still get some enjoyment out of it. And it's like, oh, okay. Done. I noticed some people who don't want to play fighting games competitively in that nature, and I'm certainly not going to be one of those people anytime soon. Of course, there is always a preferable chance of playing against a friend who actually knows what they're doing and just having a good time, even having done that recently. Playing classics like Mortal Kombat and, of course, the ever so lovable Tekken and even Vampire Savior to a point, and honestly, it was pretty damn fun. Not going to go into specific semantics about what version has what content, but it's an obvious rule that playing versus mode with a friend is going to make the experience better, but those chances do not come around so very often, which is why fighting games, in my opinion, should be treated the same when it comes to other games that aren't necessarily fighting games. Having modes that can be played against the AI and having decent gameplay all around. Even if there are mechanics that people get annoyed at, like with the Clash system in Soul Calibur 6, but then you have people defending the Ultra system or even the Super Meter from Super Turbo. And even in the first Darkstalkers, which kind of worked more or less the same. Whatever. I know Street Fighter 6 has those simplified inputs or whatever. Fine. Fighting EX Layer had the same shit. But if the game is not balanced around the intentional input system, that is a problem. Especially since Fighting EX Layer wanted to be so cool and hip by having those buffs and shit, which you can't even customize, first of all. And there's also a Switch exclusive revision that completely gimps it, so I hope that PC port does get that shit eventually, because that would be pretty embarrassing if an objectively inferior powered console compared to, say, the almighty _PC Master Race has a version which is even proper, but I'm not going to get into that. It's perfectly fine if people want to use the methods of control that they want, but when they're playing ranked, or they want to be part of a leaderboard, the inputs should be segregated. I know this sounds really irrational, but think about this for a moment. When you're playing a game that offers multiple inputs, you should have an option to only play with those inputs. And if you're going to have a ranking system, you should not be able to have mixed inputs and basically cheese your way up to the top, as I use modern slang. Think about it for a moment. I think there's 3 different inputs in Street Fighter 6. You have the modern, classic, and whatever easy mode bullshit that there is. Let's just put it into perspective. It has nothing to do with me calling the game scrubby or whatever, even though I could go on about how games like Tekken, having characters like Akuma and Geese having fireballs, would just completely ruin the whole point of the 3D fisticuffs that the game has established since the 90s, but whatever. There is no issue with the game having multiple input options. More inputs means more people can play the game, but when you're playing against other people, I think it would make sense to have an option to let you compete against the people who are using the same type of input. And if you're going to be playing the game ranked, as in the tournament established, you should not be using anything else other than the tournament standard. But then again, this is fucking Capcom we're talking about. They'll make stages that are cool and hip, like the beach stage, or the fucking plane stage that everyone bitches about, but yet they'll ban it in their official play anyway. So what the fuck is the point? My point is that if you're going to be using anything outside of the standard inputs, you should not be able to rank up in an overall leaderboard, get away with picking the inputs to let you get your Hadoukens out faster and supers, compared to actually having to do it like everyone else. It is not an issue of people not being part of that participation bullshit. It's a matter of actually earning your rewards and feeling accomplished for it. In Street Fighter 4, you had unlockable characters and colors, of which you had to go through the game's arcade mode and trials mode respectively. In Super Street Fighter 4, you only had to unlock character colors and taunts, which just basically equates to using the character more often, which makes sense. And of course, if you want to unlock the costumes, you have to pay up as DLC. There's absolutely no way of earning them outside of that. What Street Fighter 4 had at launch? The fucking content that was missing in Street Fighter 5. And if it was there, it was so horribly presented that it wasn't even funny. It pales in comparison as to what content that was in even vanilla Street Fighter 4 compared to vanilla Street Fighter 5. And then when you get Ultra Street Fighter 4 compared to Street Fighter 5, whatever edition Capcom wants to call it, it's pretty fucking embarrassing. Yet people still want to defend it because the gameplay is fun, or that there's a lot of fucking characters you can pick from, except you have to basically buy a version of a game that has the characters, Or you can just, you know, pirate it on Steam Unlocked and play it that way. Now, of course, you'll be able to play with people online, but guess what? Games like Street Fighter V barely has reason to play against the computer, whereas you could argue the same shit about Street Fighter 4, but it wasn't trying to be this overly ambitious piece of shit. Hell, I wouldn't even consider the Trials mode in Street Fighter 4 to be all that good, especially since the inputs and combos you have to do aren't even worth it. They're only really worth it if you want to unlock title plates and icons for online. Obviously not going to deny that Street Fighter 4 isn't exactly the best example of a fighting game with offline content, which is why games like BlazBlue was around at the time, but people dismiss that as being Super Twink Fighter, or even other fighting games that came out around that time, like Mortal Kombat 2011. A game that actually has much more replay value, but just gimped by shitty stories and maybe gameplay if you're a fucking Mortal Kombat purist. But what the fuck do I know? But yet you have idiots on the XCOM who will want to argue with me as if I'm the fucking idiot who knows nothing, but yet they'll want to argue over literally anything and zero on that one point and act as if they're the winner in this bullshit. It's absolutely ridiculous that people will defend Virtua Fighter as if it's the greatest thing ever. You know, I don't even really care for Virtua Fighter that much. A lot of the games are literally one and the same, and a lot of Japanese games are like that. You can even look at something like Dragon Quest. Virtua Fighter 4, depending on what version you like, and vanilla Virtua Fighter 5 are legit the only games worth playing. You want to know why? Because they have those quest modes and kumite, at least in vanilla Virtua Fighter 4, which even the vanilla version also has that AI creation tool. No, not that one. Slow your roll, slow your rolls. Artificial intelligence that you can actually train and fight against other AIs. That wasn't brought back in Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, unfortunately. But considering what was added in Virtua Fighter 4 Evolution, gameplay-wise, and not so much tutorial-wise, I say both are just as decent. There might be things that might make vanilla better, or ones that might make the revision better, but obviously you can't go wrong with either one. Obviously, they pale in comparison to, say, what Tekken 5 has to offer, or even Soul Calibur 3 when the AI isn't fucking busted and your fucking saves don't get corrupted because of bullshit by Namco. Those games have reason to play them beyond just playing against fucking random online. How people do not understand this in 2025 legitimately baffles the fuck out of me. But hey, I guess I'm just a crazy one for actually expecting companies, whether they be well-liked or otherwise, to not screw their customers over. Whether it be Capcom adding in their Enigma protected DRM for games like Shredder 2014, an IP that's barely used by them unless it's for a shitty Street Fighter cameo. Seriously, a game from fucking 2014 has DRM, modern-day DRM, that breaks Steam Deck compatibility. But hey, Capcom is great because they're bringing back Akuma, who was literally DLC in the last game. But hey, Tekken 8 is going to have Anna Williams as DLC again, so that's perfectly fine, guys. I would love if Sega actually did pull out a decent version of Virtua Fighter on modern systems that wasn't complete shit. But unfortunately, all I keep getting is just mediocre revision after mediocre revision, and history is not going to change that. Maybe Virtua Fighter 6 might change it, but I'm not having any hopes of them. Legit, the only hope I have from Sega left at this point is their supposed Streets of Rage remake. Mainly because I hated Streets of Rage 4 so fucking much, and yet people defend it as the best fighting game ever. Yeah, I'm going to be one of those people that blatantly mix up genres. You know, I'm going to be one of those genre misgenders. Yeah, that's actually a thing. That's like the only game I have any hope from Sega at this point, is that they can do a better Streets of Rage than whoever the fuck developed Streets of Rage 4. Or maybe even a better game than what Shredder's Revenge was, which... not even get into that shit. That game is so fucking overpriced, by the way, but, you know. It's Turtles, so it has to be good. Alright. But look, guys, it has moves from Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter, so it's cool and hip. Maybe Virtua Fighter 6 might bring something to the table, but I highly doubt it, and I want to see proof that Sega is actually going to do something decent and not be a fucking monotonous grind. But wait a minute, guys. I've just been informed that Street Fighter 6 World Tour is not a monotonous grind because it's not part of the core gameplay. Even though you have to play that mode to unlock the costumes for the main mode. But I'm the vassal here? Right. I censor, not censor, censor, because I care. I don't have much left tangent drive on this shit. I'm gonna buy some V-Bucks, and then I'll see about doing this again in the near future, provided that fighting games will get better again, which they probably won't. Just look at Mortal Kombat 1 and you tell me if that shit's worth defending.
KO!